This astounding dashcam photo captures the terrifying final seconds of TransAsia Airways Flight 235 in 2015. Moments after taking off from Taipei, the plane lost control and banked almost completely sideways, passing just feet above traffic before its wing clipped a taxi and struck an elevated roadway. Seconds later, the aircraft crashed into the Keelung River. Of the 58 people on board, 43 were killed and only 15 survived. Investigators later found that after one engine malfunctioned, the pilots mistakenly shut down the remaining working engine. This incredible footage shows San Francisco's Market Street in April of 1906, capturing an ordinary day of cable cars, pedestrians, horse-drawn carriages, and early automobiles. But the people you're watching had no idea their city was about to be obliterated. Just days later, on April 18th, a massive earthquake struck San Francisco, rupturing streets, collapsing buildings, and igniting fires that burned for 3 days. More than 3,000 people were killed, and over half the city's population were left homeless, with entire neighborhoods reduced to nothing but rubble. Much of what appears in this footage would soon be completely destroyed, making it an eerie glimpse of San Francisco immediately before one of the deadliest disasters in American history. Here's some incredible footage of a daring rescue from a high-rise apartment building. A fire reportedly trapped several people on the upper floors of a building in Tanzania, with thick smoke blocking their exit. With lives on the line, a group of men from a neighboring section refused to stand by and simply watch. They grabbed a table and bravely stretched it across the gap between buildings, making a makeshift bridge several stories above the ground. While getting pounded with facefuls of smoke, the men held the table steady, as one by one, the trapped residents carefully walked across it to safety. One wrong move could have sent someone plummeting to the ground below, but the makeshift rescue worked like a charm. What could have easily ended in tragedy instead became an incredible example of complete strangers risking their own safety to save the lives of others. This missing husky was found in the most horrifying place its owners could have ever expected. After the dog reportedly disappeared in Russia's remote Kamchatka Peninsula, its owners launched a drone to search the surrounding wilderness. When they finally spotted it, the husky was casually roaming around a family of wild brown bears. The footage shows the dog following the bears, running around them, and even appearing to play with them. Surprisingly, bears have occasionally been observed forming relationships with canines. In Finland, a photographer famously documented a young bear and wolf repeatedly meeting and spending several days together. Reports never revealed whether the owners were actually able to retrieve their husky, leaving what happened to the dog afterward a total mystery. This was the moment a woman was attacked by her pet cat who'd been friendly for years, showing how animals that seem completely safe can suddenly turn without warning. In many cases like this, the aggression isn't random at all. Cats are extremely good at hiding pain, and when something is wrong internally, it can build up until they react suddenly and violently. Undiagnosed injuries, infections, dental disease, or even arthritis can cause them to abruptly lash out at the person closest to them. There's also something called redirected aggression, where a cat becomes triggered by something like another animal or loud noise, but ends up attacking their owner instead. Veterinarians say that sudden, uncharacteristic aggression in cats is often one of the clearest signs that something is medically wrong. In many cases, these attacks end with the owner needing stitches or hospital treatment. In 1991, on Kawagarbo, a sacred mountain in Tibetan Buddhism, a Japanese-Chinese expedition attempted to summit the peak, which had never been climbed. But an avalanche suddenly struck their camp, killing all 17 members. After the disaster, climbing was banned, and Kawagarbo remains one of the highest unclimbed mountains in the world. Bernie Madoff, the architect behind one of the largest financial frauds in history, died in 2021 while serving a 150-year sentence at the Federal Medical Center in North Carolina. Despite traditional Jewish burial customs, he was cremated, and his family refused to claim his remains. His ashes were instead sent to a law office in New York, where they reportedly remained unclaimed, sitting in storage years after his death. While on vacation in Bulgaria in 2014, 28-year-old German man Lars Matank got into a bar fight that left him with a ruptured eardrum. He was unable to fly home with his friends due to the injuries, but told them he was totally fine and only planned on staying for a couple extra nights. However, the next day, Lars began acting paranoid. He called his mom and whispered that she should cancel his credit cards because someone was trying to kill him. Security cams in the hotel showed him pacing up and down the halls and peeking out the windows for several hours. After arriving at the airport the next day, Lars saw the airport doctor, who gave him the okay to fly. But that's when Lars began shaking and suddenly yelled, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here." He then got up and sprinted from the office, leaving behind all of his luggage, including his phone, wallet, and ID. Once outside, he was seen jogging from the airport, hopping a fence, and sprinting in the direction of a nearby forest. Lars would never be seen again. Here's some insane footage of a 600-pound Florida man being rescued from his apartment after suffering from a sudden medical emergency. Because he couldn't be safely carried through the building's doors or stairways, firefighters had to remove part of his exterior wall instead. They strapped him onto a heavy-duty shipping pallet, attached it to a crane, and slowly lowered him from the apartment as neighbors gathered outside to watch. The painstaking rescue took a large team of emergency responders and specialized equipment just to get him into an ambulance. In the past few decades, some morbidly obese patients have been sent to zoos for MRI and CT scans because standard hospital machines can't accommodate their weight. Zoos have bigger scanners designed for large animals, making them a practical solution in these extreme cases. In July of 2024, 24-year-old Chinese mukbang streamer Pan Xiaoting died after collapsing during a marathon eating livestream. Despite previously being hospitalized for gastrointestinal bleeding, she reportedly continued doing 10-hour binge-eating broadcasts, consuming up to 22 pounds of food in a single session. Her autopsy report said her stomach was severely deformed and still packed with undigested food, with many outlets reporting she likely suffered a fatal stomach rupture following the extreme binge. In 2004, Gail Laverne Grimes died in the hospital after surgeons spent 6 exhausting hours trying to separate her skin from a couch. The 500-pound woman had been sitting on her living room sofa for 6 years, to the point where her skin completely fused to the fabric. Rescue workers had to transport Gail and her couch using a trailer, and she ended up dying while still attached to it. Studies have shown that obese drivers are 80% more likely to die in a car accident than drivers who are not overweight. John Brower Minock was the heaviest person ever reliably recorded, with doctors estimating his peak weight at around 1,400 pounds. After being hospitalized, he was placed on a strict 1,200 calorie per day diet, and over the next 2 years lost an astonishing 924 pounds, the largest documented human weight loss in history. But unfortunately, after leaving the hospital, he gradually regained most of the weight back. He was eventually readmitted after weighing about 950 pounds and died in 1983 at the age of 41. A 6-year-old boy from Germany who loves motorcycles was diagnosed with cancer. So his family posted online asking if anyone could ride their motorcycles down their street to help cheer him up. They would have been happy if only 30 or 40 people showed up, but the post went viral and over 15,000 bikers ended up coming. Brazilian mother Silvia Greco won FIFA's Best Fan Award in 2009 after she was seen in the crowd explaining the entire match to her son that was blind. A Brazilian cow that managed to escape being slaughtered was later found at a local water park riding the slides and lounging in the pool. The cow's owner later decided to spare the cow's life and even ended up naming it Slide. Bob Marley gave his friend Vincent Tata Ford official credit for the lyrics to the song No Woman, No Cry. Ford ran a soup kitchen in the Jamaican ghetto where Marley grew up, so Bob gave him credit for writing the song to give him royalty payments that would keep the soup kitchen open. After Bax the dog went blind, his friend Buttons the goose became his eyes by hanging onto him and honking to direct him. An Arab-American man from California named Mohammed Bazik is a foster parent who only takes in orphan children who are terminally ill. He's fostered more than 80 children over 20 years and has continued this practice even after his wife passed away in 2015. When Alexander the Great died in 323 BC at the age of 32, his body reportedly showed no signs of decomposition for 6 days, astonishing the ancient Greeks and fueling the belief that he was a god. But modern medical experts have proposed a much darker explanation. Alexander may have suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare neurological disorder that causes full-body paralysis while leaving the person mentally aware. If true, it means he may have been mistakenly declared dead while still conscious, and was ultimately buried alive, fully aware of what was happening but unable to move or speak. In 1969, the Black Panthers launched a free breakfast program that fed thousands of hungry kids before school in the poorest black communities. But J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI saw it as a threat to national security, apparently fearing that it would make the Black Panthers look too humane. So in response, in multiple cities, police raided kitchens at dawn, tearing apart food supplies and in some cases even urinating on the groceries, making it clear that feeding black children was more threatening than letting them starve. In August of 2004, 21-year-old Josh Hutcherson and his longtime friend 23-year-old Frankie Brome spent the night drinking at a bar in Georgia. On the drive home, Brome leaned his head outside the passenger side window, apparently to get some fresh air. At the same time, Hutcherson, heavily intoxicated with a blood alcohol level around .22, veered off the road and struck a support wire for a telephone pole, decapitating Brome instantly. Apparently unaware of what had happened, Hutcherson drove more than 10 miles home, parked the truck with Brome's headless body still inside, and went to bed. The next morning, a neighbor discovered the body still inside the vehicle, and Brome's head was later recovered from the crash site. Hutcherson was charged with vehicular homicide and pleaded guilty in 2005, receiving a 5-year sentence. In a surprising twist, Brome's family, who had known Hutcherson for years, publicly asked the court for some leniency, stating they didn't want Hutcherson imprisoned. Real skeletons were used while filming the first Poltergeist because it was cheaper than making prop ones at the time. The woman who acted in this creepy scene wasn't told they were real until after the shooting was finished. Many people believe that using these real skeletons caused the set to become cursed. For example, while filming the creepy clown doll scene, the doll nearly killed Robbie Freeling when an animatronic error caused his arm to quickly tighten around the boy's neck. When the young actor started gesturing that he couldn't breathe, Steven Spielberg thought it was just really good acting. While his life was spared, multiple actors from the movie series weren't so lucky. Dominique Dunne, who played the older sister in the first film, was murdered by her ex-boyfriend right after the movie premiered. In 1988, the little girl who played Carol Ann died of cardiac arrest at the young age of 12. The actor who played the evil preacher in Poltergeist 2 died of stomach cancer just after they finished filming. And the actor who played the Native American shaman died soon afterwards during a heart-lung transplant. Ezra Miller has a long track record of disturbingly erratic and violent behavior that has deeply tarnished his public image. In 2020, Miller was caught on video choking a woman and throwing her to the ground outside of a bar in Iceland, an act the victim later confirmed was not staged. In 2022, he was arrested multiple times in Hawaii for aggressive outbursts, including lunging at patrons in a karaoke bar and throwing a chair that struck a woman in the head. That same year, Miller was accused of grooming a 12-year-old girl and using drugs, intimidation, and emotional manipulation to control her. He then hosted a woman and her children inside a home in Vermont that was allegedly filled with unattended firearms and marijuana, where one toddler reportedly nearly choked on a bullet. Reports have also surfaced of Miller claiming to be a messianic figure, identifying as both Jesus and the devil. With his career now in shambles, Miller has acknowledged his suffering from complex mental health issues. A woman from Turkey recently underwent surgery to have 35 olive pits, 28 date seeds, and 5 stones removed from her digestive tract. She was experiencing severe abdominal pain, leading to the discovery that she'd been swallowing various pits and seeds for decades. After narrowly avoiding death due to the complications, she's now vocal about urging people to never swallow large seeds. In the weeks leading up to D-Day, General Eisenhower was under so much stress that he'd been smoking 6 packs of cigarettes, drinking 24 cups of coffee, and averaging just 2 hours of sleep every day. In the 1950s, 3 campers were found dead at their campsite in Oregon without any sign of struggle. Investigators were stumped until they soon found a dead newt in the hunter's coffee pot. They likely died after drinking the coffee, since newts can produce a toxin that's 10,000 times more potent than cyanide. Ancient Greek lawmaker Charondas issued a law stating that anyone who brought weapons into the Athenian assembly would be executed. One day after hunting in the countryside, he entered the assembly without knowing that his hunting knife was still attached to his belt. He then promptly took his own life to uphold his own law. Pat Morita, the actor who played Mr. Miyagi, spent the first 9 years of his life in a hospital due to tuberculosis. After undergoing extensive surgery and finally learning how to walk, he was sent to a Japanese internment camp in Arizona. During the 4th century BC in Nordlingen, Germany, this 9-year-old boy became severely disabled following a leg infection, was killed by a blow to the head, then thrown into a grain silo that was reused as a garbage pit. A Queen's Guard horse named Obelisk used to lure in pigeons by dropping oats from his mouth. When they got close enough to him, he would brutally stomp them to death. Obelisk was eventually sent away for additional psychological training. Considered one of the greatest strength athletes of all time, Icelandic powerlifter John Paul Sigmarsson once famously said, "There's no reason to be alive if you can't do deadlift." A few years later, at the young age of 32, he died of an aortic rupture while deadlifting in his gym. In An Indian actor named Shyam risked his life to transform for a role. He went 9 straight days without sleep so that the tissues under his eyes would swell up. Leo DiCaprio nearly died in the process of filming The Revenant. To take on the role of Hugh Glass, Leo repeatedly camped out in the wilderness in freezing temps, slept in animal carcasses, and ate raw bison liver. He nearly froze to death on multiple occasions and said it was his toughest role to take on by far. While filming for The Grinch, the thick makeup and prosthetics made Jim Carrey feel like he was being buried alive each day. It became so brutal for him that they had to hire a former CIA agent to teach him techniques for coping with torture. The day after Shia LaBeouf landed his role in the war movie Fury, he joined the U.S. National Guard, got baptized, and got a tattoo that reads "Surrender to Jesus." Afterwards, he pulled his own tooth out, cut up his face with a knife, spent days watching horses die, and didn't bathe for 4 months. 2013, 19-year-old Maureen Kelly was camping in the forests of Washington State with some friends when she suddenly told them that she wanted to go on a spiritual quest. She then stripped naked, crossed a nearby creek, and was never seen again. Police quickly discovered her bare footprints on the other side of the creek, but they ended at a paved road and the trail went cold. Often translated as death by 1,000 cuts, Ling Chi was a brutal form of execution used in China for nearly 1,000 years until it was outlawed in 1905. Journalist Sir Henry Norman described it as, "The criminal is fastened to a rough cross, and the executioner, armed with a sharp knife, begins by grasping handfuls from the fleshy parts of the body, such as the thighs and breasts, and slicing them off. Then the limbs are cut off piecemeal at the wrists and the ankles, the elbows and the knees, the shoulders and hips. Finally, the victim is stabbed to the heart and his head is cut off." Many reports detailed victims screaming for hours until they died. 1986, 21-year-old Christopher Thomas Knight ran out of gas in rural Maine, entered the woods, and lived there for the next 27 years without human contact. He survived by committing over 1,000 burglaries against houses in the area to be able to endure the harsh winters of Maine. Knight was eventually captured by a game warden and sentenced to 7 months in jail, later vowing to live normally and to never steal again. In the 19th century, African woman Sarah Bartman was displayed as a freak show attraction in Europe for her unusually large backside. Marketed as the missing link between man and beast, she was often brought out as an exhibit at wealthy parties and private events. In 1815, Sarah died of an unknown illness at the age of 26, likely as a result of her poor living conditions. Her remains were later displayed in the French Museum of Natural History for over a century, before she was finally laid to rest in her native South Africa in 2002. Shelley Duvall said the amount of emotional trauma from filming The Shining was unbearable and excruciating. She was genuinely terrified while on set and often pulled clumps of her hair out in between takes. Due to the stress and torment that director Stanley Kubrick put her through, Shelley had a complete mental breakdown after the movie was filmed. The set of Texas Chainsaw Massacre was filled with 500 pounds of rotting animal corpses. The stench mixed with the heat caused actors to vomit constantly. The director said that by the last few days of filming, every time he yelled cut, the actors and crew would immediately puke. A group of psychologists studied 400 movies to find the most realistic psychopath, and the winner was Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. They said that he seems to be effectively invulnerable and resistant to any form of humanity or emotion. Popular characters Hannibal Lecter and Patrick Bateman didn't even make it in the top 25. Earlier this week, New York State officials raided the home of social media star Peanut the Squirrel and seized him from their owners before tragically euthanizing their beloved pet. Peanut was a rescue squirrel who was taken in more than 7 years ago by animal refuge owner Mark Longo. Having lost half its tail in a severe attack, Peanut wasn't adept enough to survive in the wild, so Longo decided to care for the squirrel in his home, eventually turning him into an adorable online sensation. According to reports, the state's DEC received multiple anonymous complaints about Peanut before showing up to Longo's home with at least 6 officers to confiscate the pet along with their rescue raccoon named Fred. The scumbag DEC claimed that it's illegal to keep young wildlife as pets since they're not well suited for life in captivity and may carry viruses. Upon hearing about Peanut and Fred's deaths, Longo tearfully posted that he was in deep shock and grief since Peanut was the best thing that ever happened to us. In November of '99, the girlfriend of Panthers wide receiver Ray Caruth was shot 4 times and later died in the hospital. It was soon determined that her NFL boyfriend had hired a hitman to kill her after she reportedly refused to abort their baby. The baby ended up surviving, and Caruth went to prison for 19 years before being released in 2018. During a tense pro basketball game in 1992, Serbian player Boban Jankovic was frustrated with a foul call and slammed his head into a padded concrete post. He immediately dropped to the floor and was never able to walk again after badly damaging his spinal cord. Earlier this year, 44-year-old Pennsylvania man John Matthew Chapman was sentenced to life in prison after driving his girlfriend across the country and luring her into a Nevada desert for a bondage photo shoot. He then bound her to a signpost with zip ties, taped her mouth and nose shut, and watched as she died. In 1990, rock and roll pioneer Chuck Berry bought a restaurant in Missouri that didn't go very well for him. Shortly after opening, he was sued by several women who claimed he installed a video camera in the ladies' bathroom. Berry opted for a class action settlement with 59 women that cost him over $1.2 million. He claimed he set up the camera to catch a worker he suspected was stealing from his restaurant. But when police raided his home, they found several videotapes of women using the bathroom, and at least one of them was a minor. During the SARS outbreak in 2004, a Taiwanese woman made a bold attempt to protect herself from the virus. She bathed in a tub filled with 40% alcohol, hoping this would kill any of the potential germs on her body. She laid down in the fluid at 11 p.m. and was discovered dead by her family the next morning. An autopsy revealed that her blood alcohol level was 1.35%, meaning she absorbed a significant amount of alcohol through her skin. In 2007, Navy SEAL Mike Day was shot 27 times by 4 members of Al-Qaeda before being knocked out by a grenade. Not only did he survive, but Mike even ended up killing all 4 of the militants and walked away on his own after regaining consciousness. Jeremiah Clarke was a British composer who couldn't decide whether to take his own life by drowning or hanging himself, so he flipped a coin. The coin landed on its edge in the mud, so he went home and shot himself instead. Squeezing someone's testicles very tightly can have roughly the same effect as using an EpiPen, but I wouldn't suggest doing this because it could also kill them. Your body is the weakest from 3 to 4 a.m., making this the time when most people die in their sleep. Dutchman Dirk Willems was a religious prisoner who escaped his execution in 1569. When the guard chasing him fell through the ice in a nearby river, Willems turned around to save him. He was then recaptured and burned at the stake. In 1935, Grace McDaniels became a circus freak show star known as the Mule-Faced Woman and was paid $175 per week. Her severe facial deformity was caused by a cancerous lip tumor that ended up taking her life in 1958. In the 12th century Catholic Church, innocence was judged by dunking the suspect's hand in a pot of boiling water. If God had not healed the wound within 3 days, the suspect was found guilty of the crime. In November of 2004, Peter Porco was struck in the head 16 times with an axe while he was asleep in his New York home. But he miraculously woke up the next morning, made breakfast and coffee for himself, and finally fell dead while picking up his newspaper. He had been completely unaware of his battered state and the pools of blood all around him. In 2019, a Brazilian gang leader tried escaping from his 73-year prison sentence by disguising himself as his teenage daughter who was visiting. He planned on leaving her behind in his place, but the guards weren't fooled by his disguise and stopped him at the exit. 3 days later, he hung himself. In 1962, a 10-year-old boy from Mexico City found an industrial radioactive capsule and left it in the kitchen cabinet of his home. Within a few months, the boy, his pregnant mother, his 2-year-old sister, and his grandmother all died from severe radiation sickness. In 2013, a Brazilian soccer referee was involved in a heated argument with a player and ended up stabbing him to death. Outraged fans quickly stormed the field before stoning him to death, decapitating him, and putting his head on a stake in the middle of the field. In the history of the MLB, there have only been 3 players with the first name Aurelio. Amazingly but tragically, they all died the same way, by car accident. Many historians consider Brooklyn player Jim Creighton to be the first superstar of baseball, but he died suddenly in 1862 after swinging so hard on a home run ball that he ruptured his bladder. During the 1910s, there was an American baseball team completely consisting of death row prisoners. As long as they kept winning, their executions were delayed. In 1957, a woman attending a Phillies game was hit with a foul ball that broke her nose. The game was briefly paused and then resumed once the woman was put on a stretcher. As they carried her away, the very next pitch was fouled off and hit the exact same woman, breaking a bone in her knee. Vietnam War veteran Rick Rescorla was the director of security at Morgan Stanley when the Twin Towers were attacked on 9/11. After watching the first explosion from his South Tower window, Rick ignored the announcement that urged employees to stay put, instead grabbing his bullhorn and started evacuating his 2,700 employees. He encouraged them by singing Cornish songs just like he did in Vietnam and ended up saving all but 9 of his employees. Rescorla was last seen on the 10th floor of the South Tower, running up the stairs to rescue more people just minutes before the tower collapsed. In 1991, a decomposing woman was found hanging from a shower in a New Mexico motel room. Despite an image of her being found in the room, she and the man in the photo still remain unidentified to this day. Her first name is believed to be Becca, only thanks to an anonymous tip given to police in 2021. The animal that causes the most deaths in the US annually is deer. This is due to them blindly running into roadways, resulting in an estimated 200 deaths per year. The runner-up is bees, wasps, and hornets, accounting for around 60 deaths annually. Tennessee man James Washington was always the prime suspect of a 1995 murder, but there was never sufficient evidence to charge him. That was until 2012 when he was having a heart attack and confessed to the murder since he believed he was on his deathbed. But he ended up recovering and was convicted based on this confession, which he later tried to take back. In 1880, the Queen of Thailand's boat capsized on the way to her palace. But despite many witnesses, nobody dared to save the drowning queen and her daughter. This was because touching the queen under any circumstances was a crime punishable by death. Bobby Leach was a world-renowned daredevil who became the second person to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. A few years later, he died from a vicious infection after slipping on an orange peel. In 1996, a man named Michael Paul was on his way home from church when he decided to crack his neck just like any other time. But a few minutes afterwards, he suddenly started sweating profusely and then went pale. By the time Michael was brought to a hospital, he had already slipped into a coma and died after 12 days of being on life support. An autopsy later revealed that the neck crack must have damaged one of the main arteries to his brain and resulted in a fatal stroke. This photo is the definition of fear. A young woman from LA was evading a home intruder by hiding on her roof, where she managed to grab her phone and call 911. She said her greatest fear was that the intruder would try to hide where she was hiding. Luckily, authorities soon had the area surrounded and the man is now in prison. Here's some disturbing footage of an old lady with a knife approaching the front door of a New Jersey home at 3 a.m. As creepy as the footage may seem, the poor woman is most likely just suffering from dementia. And finally, this is why you should always be aware of your surroundings while scuba diving. This South African salvage diver nearly had his head taken off by a great white, but luckily the shark wasn't hungry at the time. In honor of my least favorite holiday, here are some morbid facts about love. When Teddy Roosevelt was 25 years old, his wife and mother died just hours apart from each other on Valentine's Day. For his journal entry that day, he drew a large black X and wrote, "The light has gone out of my life." These are the 1888 graves of a Catholic woman and her Protestant husband. Due to religious restrictions at the time, they weren't allowed to be buried together in the same cemetery. So this was their creative way of being united and together forever. The Hassanlu lovers died around 800 BC and were discovered in Iran in 1972. They appeared to have died while kissing each other and remained that way for 2,800 years. In 1994, a pair of Japanese virgins waited more than a decade to finally break the ice with each other on their wedding night. But sadly, each of them had undiagnosed heart conditions and both died from heart attacks as they made love for the first and last time. At the age of 18, Major Donnie Dunnigan became the youngest ever drill instructor in the U.S. Marines. He served 25 years in the Marine Corps and was wounded several times during his 3 tours in Vietnam, earning himself 13 promotions along with 3 Purple Heart medals and a Bronze Star. Throughout his decorated career, he managed to keep secret that he was also the voice of Bambi in the 1942 Disney film. Lepa Radic was a 17-year-old Yugoslav resistance fighter who was sentenced to death in 1943 for shooting at the Nazis. As the rope was being tied around her neck, she was offered a way out of the gallows if she simply revealed the names of her leaders. But she declined, saying they'd reveal themselves when they came to avenge her. In 2020, a sunbathing mom from Georgia was just seconds away from being crushed to death by a falling tree. If her son hadn't told her to run, she most likely would have died instantly. A Texas man was chasing a rattlesnake on his lawn that eventually slithered underneath his old shed. Upon investigating with a forklift, he discovered that it was completely infested with dozens of rattlesnakes. And finally, this is why you should always check the toilet bowl before plopping down on the seat. Yep, that's a scorpion. And apparently you shouldn't flush a scorpion down the toilet since they could survive in water for like 2 days. Have fun. A sheep-herding dog named Casper faced off against 11 threatening coyotes and killed 8 of them on the farm. He then went missing for 2 days, most likely to track the remaining coyotes and finish the job. His vet said he's incredibly lucky to be alive, while his owner agreed to let him retire. During World War II, a German pilot spotted an American pilot's crippled plane in the sky. He noticed that the gunner was dead, the crew was injured, and that they didn't pose any threat. So instead of destroying the plane, he led it to safety and spared the men's lives. 40 years later, the 2 pilots reunited and became fishing buddies. After TV star Jack Benny died in 1974, his widow Mary received a red rose in the mail. After several days of receiving a new rose each day, she finally called to find out who was sending them. The florist told her that Jack had arranged for a new rose to be sent to her every day until she died. After Star Wars The Phantom Menace was released in 1999, Jar Jar Binks quickly became the most hated character in the franchise. The backlash was so devastating for Ahmed Best, the actor who played him, that he nearly took his own life. The first chainsaw was invented by 2 Scottish doctors in the year 1780. It was originally used to help open up the pelvis during childbirth. In 1958 North Carolina, a white girl told her parents that she kissed 2 black boys aged 9 and 7 on the cheeks. The girl's father then arranged a mob to go to the boys' homes where they threatened to lynch them and their parents. Soon enough, police showed up where they proceeded to arrest and severely beat the young boys. Charged with rape, they were placed in jail for 6 days without being allowed any contact with their parents. They were detained for nearly 4 months before finally being pardoned by the governor. It's infamously known as the kissing case of 1958. The most valuable tooth in the world belonged to Sir Isaac Newton, who died nearly 300 years ago. In 1816, it sold for $3,600, which equates to more than $75,000 today. After fears that they were wiped out by bushfires, the rare pygmy possum was thankfully rediscovered in 2020. Located in various museums, these are the only 3 authentic Jolly Roger flags in the world. They were flown to identify pirate ships before or during attacks in the early 18th century. Spotted Lake in Canada features distinctive patterns due to its high concentrations of various minerals. The Formosan clouded leopard was declared legally extinct in 2013 after having no sightings since 1983. But in 2019, it was spotted for the first time in nearly 40 years in eastern Taiwan. When he was a sophomore in college, NBA legend Karl Malone had a child with a 13-year-old girl. The son grew up to become NFL player Demetrius Bell, but he said he only met his dad on one occasion after graduating high school, where Malone told him that it was too late to start a father-son relationship and that he would have to make his way on his own. In 2007, 73-year-old Sherman Sizemore was undergoing surgery to have his gallbladder removed. An anesthesiologist had given him drugs to paralyze his muscles, but forgot to administer the anesthesia until 16 minutes after the first cut was made, meaning he felt everything. Doctors later gave him an amnesiac in hopes that he would forget the trauma, but it apparently didn't work on his subconscious. After 2 weeks of suffering from horrible insomnia, nightmares, and paranoia, Sizemore ended up taking his own life. As part of a project called As If Nothing Happened, an AI drew Michael Jackson as if he were still alive and had never received plastic surgery. Shortly after Jackson was charged with child molestation in 2003, his pet chimpanzee Bubbles reportedly attempted to take his own life. Michael suffered from severe insomnia and didn't receive any real sleep in the 60 days leading up to his death. Instead, his doctor had been putting him under general anesthesia every night, which would end up killing him at the age of 50. The details revealed in Michael Jackson's autopsy report were nothing short of disturbing. He was almost completely bald and had a number of cosmetic tattoos, including permanent eyeliner and lip liner. He had puncture wounds all over his body and had nothing but pills in his stomach at the time of death. Known as R.H. Null, this man has the rarest blood type in the world. It's called the golden blood type since it's only been found in 43 people throughout recorded history. Some animals can be born as bilateral gynandromorphs, meaning they're male on one side and female on the other. This is the pyramid capstone of Amenemhat II, one of the only intact pyramidions in the world. In odd cases, dead organisms are filled in with opal rather than mud or stone, creating these mesmerizing fossils. This cat suffers from myostatin-related hypertrophy, a very rare condition that causes muscles to grow excessively large. This steak is so incredibly rare that it could probably use a few more minutes in the sous vide. This insanely rare polka-dotted zebrafoal was photographed last year in Kenya. There are only 20 stealth bombers in the world, but this one was caught mid-flight in a Google Maps photo. Talk about a photo bomber. Once believed to be aliens, this is one of the many 2,000-year-old elongated skulls that were discovered on Paracas Peninsula in Peru. Cranial elongation was commonly practiced by the Paracas people by tightly wrapping the head in cloth during the first few years of life. These toilets in a medieval castle should make you feel thankful for modern plumbing. After Hurricane Dorian, a woman took a walk along a beach in Virginia and found this incredible collection of prehistoric shark teeth just lying on the sand. An incredible discovery was recently made during renovations at a church in Naples, Italy. Behind a 16th century painting called Life of San Severo, workers found a second hidden painting depicting St. George slaying a dragon. During an interview shortly before his death, Michael admitted that he would often talk to child mannequins just to feel less alone. He would also frequently cry at the sight of kids playing in the park since it was something that Michael would never experience himself. Here's a 1985 prediction of what Michael would look like in the year 2000 versus what he actually ended up looking like. Michael had a meeting scheduled at the top of one of the Twin Towers on 9/11. But after talking with his mom on the phone all night, he overslept and missed the appointment. In 2003, a supermarket was once completely shut down so that Michael could live out his lifelong dream of shopping like an ordinary person. All the other shoppers were either actors or his friends, and they paid no attention to Michael. He played around the store like a child and even compared the experience to going to Disneyland. Here's an amazing video of Sandra the orangutan cleaning her enclosure and washing her hands at the Center for Great Apes in Florida. She learned to do this after observing her caretakers do the exact same thing. I don't know what to say. When this deaf man's cat realized that meowing was useless, the cat learned to communicate with him using signs. This clip shows him successfully requesting a treat at the dinner table. The penduline tit has evolved to develop a creative way for preventing snakes from entering its nest. The bird builds a hidden opening while making the visible entrance lead to an empty pocket that tricks the snake. In 1991, retired truck driver Terry Horton found a painting at a California thrift shop that she purchased for $5. She thought it was hideous and planned on throwing darts at it until one of her friends suggested getting it checked out. It ended up being a priceless painting by Jackson Pollock worth right around $50 million. In 2015, a man swimming near Huntington Beach, California was suddenly struck in the back by a great white. After making it ashore and going to the hospital, doctors assured him that he'd be fine. But upon seeing his x-rays, they realized he had a cancerous tumor that they were just barely able to remove in time. In 1923, a young jockey named Frank Hayes suffered a heart attack and suddenly died in the middle of a horse race. But his body remained on the saddle throughout the race, and his horse Sweet Kiss crossed the finish line first. This was the first time that Hayes had ever won a race, and the last. As a child, Michael's father Joseph would constantly torment him about his appearance, often calling him Fat Nose. Michael went on to have 4 rhinoplasties and was insecure about his appearance his entire life. On one occasion in the 1960s, Joe wanted to teach his kids a lesson about leaving the windows open at night. So when little Michael was asleep, his father climbed through the window wearing a mask and screamed at him. From that point on, Michael would have recurring nightmares about being kidnapped from his bedroom. But the abuse didn't stop there. Joe would also hold onto a belt while the Jackson 5 rehearsed, ready to strike his children if one of them made a mistake. Michael was so terrified of his father that he would sometimes throw up just from his presence. Michael once said that he felt the safest while performing on stage since his father wouldn't be able to beat him in front of a crowd. This was the last photo taken of legendary rapper Tupac Shakur just minutes before he was gunned down on Las Vegas Boulevard in 1996. Tupac was hit 4 times and was put on life support at a nearby hospital where he would end up dying a week later. His body was cremated the next day, and members of his rap group Outlaws smoked some of his ashes after mixing them with some kush. Here's a 1907 mugshot of Bertha Baranda after she was convicted of mayhem for slicing off her husband's penis with a straight razor. In 1939, Gone with the Wind actress Hattie McDaniel became the first ever African American to win an Oscar. When she was dying from cancer in 1952, her final wish was to be buried in the Hollywood Forever Cemetery in LA. But the request was ultimately denied since the cemetery had a strict all-white policy at the time. A Florida photographer captured this incredible image of an owl that raised a duckling after mistaking the egg for its own. Concerned that the owl would eat the duckling once it realized the situation, a local wildlife sanctuary agreed to take care of the baby bird. This bulb of garlic didn't have separate cloves, it grew as just one solid piece. This rare phenomenon known as ice eggs occurs when ice is rolled over by the perfect combination of wind and water. This rare medium well? Ugh. This is one of the only known video recordings of the golden langur, an extremely rare species of monkey that Himalayan tribes have long considered to be sacred. Researchers say they work extra hard to avoid human contact, making them extremely difficult to observe in the wild. In 2003, a skeleton measuring 6 inches long was found in a remote part of Chile's Atacama Desert. Due to its elongated skull and rather developed bones considering its size, the specimen was initially rumored to be an alien. But after extensive testing, scientists determined that it was more likely the skeleton of a stillborn human girl that had close to 70 different genetic mutations. According to a recent study, people in the US who were born before 1996 have a slightly lower IQ than those born afterwards. This is due to the negative effects of leaded gasoline, which was finally banned completely on January 1st, 1996. In 1924, gifted college students Leopold and Loeb planned out the perfect murders simply to demonstrate their superior intellectual abilities. But after kidnapping and murdering a child, they left an abundance of evidence and were swiftly convicted of murder. Disney's first water park, called River Country, closed permanently in 2001 after an 11-year-old boy died from a brain-eating parasite he got in the lake. The park still lies completely abandoned to this day. The actor who used to play Gaston at Disney World Orlando accidentally killed himself by attempting to shoot fireworks off his head. Disney World is one of the most popular places on Earth for scattering ashes. It happens so frequently that employees have a special code word to report it for cleanup. A study conducted in 2016 concluded that the Thunder Mountain Railroad reliably helps people pass kidney stones. In 2010, a restaurant manager at Disneyland Paris took his own life after working a shift. Before doing so, he left a note on the wall that translated to, "I don't want to go back to Mickey ever again." If Barbie were a real person, she wouldn't be capable of lifting up her own head and would have to walk on all fours due to her proportions. She would be severely anorexic and suffer from chronic diarrhea due to only having room for a few inches of intestines and half a liver. At some point during the Middle Ages, it was believed that sperm produced by the left testicle resulted in having a girl. So to ensure having a son, men would sometimes have it removed. Here's a photo of anti-war demonstrators protesting outside the 1968 DNC in Chicago. Shirtless protester Frank Plata was later drafted by the U.S. Army and killed during the Vietnam War. When Japan executes criminals by hanging, 3 different buttons on the wall are pressed by 3 different people at the same time. This is so that none of them know who actually did the killing, since only one button is randomly programmed to open the trap door. In 1944, the Ghost Army was created as the first tactical deception unit in the U.S. Army. They used inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, and loudspeakers blaring sound effects to throw off their enemies. The Ghost Army was able to make a force seem 30 times larger than its actual size, often sending the Nazis retreating. A U.S. naval destroyer once won a battle against a Japanese submarine by throwing potatoes at them, which the Japanese thought were grenades and quickly retreated. Ancient Persian leader Cambyses II once used cats to defeat an Egyptian army. Knowing that the Egyptians viewed felines as sacred, he brought hundreds of cats to the front lines and had his soldiers paint them on their shields. The Egyptians simply refused to fight and were easily defeated as a result. While filming a scene from The Mummy during which his character was being hanged, Brendan Fraser nearly died. The rope was tied too tightly around the actor's neck and Brendan quickly passed out when it constricted his carotid artery. If the film crew hadn't acted quickly, he likely would have died within minutes. Owen Wilson was originally casted as Tug Speedman's agent in Tropic Thunder, but he had to be replaced by Matthew McConaughey after attempting suicide in 2007. Margaret Hamilton, the woman who played the Wicked Witch of the West, was badly burned while filming The Wizard of Oz. She returned after a stay at the hospital, but refused to do any more scenes involving fire. So her stunt double took her place in one scene where she rode a prop that ended up spewing smoke and exploding, sending her to the hospital for 11 days and nearly costing her a leg. When Steven Tyler was 27 years old, he started a relationship with a 14-year-old girl. He took her on the road with him, got her pregnant, and forced her to have an abortion when she was only 16. United Airlines has repeatedly killed more pets per year than any other commercial airline by far. Here's footage of a World War I soldier experiencing shell shock, aka PTSD, when shown part of his uniform. Many of these men were executed by their own militaries since they were simply viewed as cowards at the time. Anton syndrome is a rare psychological condition that can affect people who suddenly go blind. They're unaware of their blindness and outright deny it since their brain generates false images causing them to believe that they can still see.